I came to the conclusion that, yes, God allowed it to happen because everybody has free will. But that doesn't mean he wasn't sitting right there with me crying and holding me during that and protecting me.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for the Forum, author, and speaker. I featured my guest today, Kimberly Souba, in a Faith Conversations feature for the Forum late last year, and in our interviews realized how fitting she'd be to tell her story another way, through laying it out in podcast form. Gratefully, she, a podcaster herself, didn't hesitate to say yes. The very question we'll ask today, can sexual trauma be healed, presupposes our guest's reality, that she is indeed a victim of sexual abuse that happened, like too many, as a child at the hands of a more powerful adult. It's a tragedy for our world, our country, and very personally for Kimberly. Through sharing from her heart and words the path she traveled from healing into redemption, we'll learn about hope and how possible it is even for those who feel they are broken beyond repair. Part of Kimberly's healing journey led her to writing, which becomes a significant part of the renewal that's taken place within her. Through communicating her experiences in her podcast and through her books for both children and adults, Kimberly leads others into the light. This is her life's passion, along with the faith that she discovered along the way, in which keeps her steady through life's ups and downs. Few individuals and families have been untouched by sexual abuse, but not all have been able to tell the kind of story Kimberly shares. Though hard one, her story of healing has something that we all can learn from. I know that Kimberly's testimony will bring hope, so let's sit back now and just listen to the journey of one soul's yearning toward God in the midst of the impossible. Well, welcome, Kimberly. It's so good to have you in the Forum today. We don't always get to have our guests in the Forum if it's a remote, but you're local, so here we are.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. It's quite a pleasure to be here and kind of. I didn't know where the Forum was located since I'm still, fairly new to the area, but it was pretty easy to get to. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. We met at, somehow I found out you were part of our parish. And so we go to the same parish, but it's a big parish. So we don't always see each other. I see you every once in a while.
And we're part of the North Dakota Professional Communication.
Mm-hmm.
Communicator, excuse me.
We have a lot of crossovers. Yes, so I love that. So it was bound to happen that we were going to meet at some point.
100%.
Yeah. So I have interviewed you before, but I know that today will be a little bit different and it's going to be more of a free, I'll get to just hear from you, not chop up your words into a story. So, but let's start as we usually do, but we're going to answer a question like we always do throughout the course of this conversation. And the one that we're answering today is a pretty serious topic. Can sexual trauma be healed? You're going to lead us through that with your journey as the beginning point. But first, before we even get to that point, I just want to know a little bit about you and about your childhood too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Illinois. I have a twin brother and then a sister who just had a birthday. So right now the three of us are all the same age until June.
Oh, funny.
She was not 3 months premature. So I just love to say that because it's like people are like, "Are you triplets?" We're like, "No."
Yeah.
But we grew up. My parents were divorced when I was 18 months old. And my mom, as my early childhood, she was addicted to drugs and alcohol and stuff. And so we moved around a lot. And then when I was about 10 years old, we moved in with my grandparents, and they started raising the three of us kids. And, typical farm childhood, back then I was, always bored, but now I'm like, oh, I wish I was back on the farm, Hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
But non-Catholic family, my grandma took us to church every week, got us involved in sports and the typical childhood stuff. And slowly, as time went on, I was starting to have these nightmares, and they were this exact same. And the nightmare was that I was in my room and I was being attacked, and my door was actually a steel door. And my grandpa and my uncles and a few other people were trying to get at me to save me. And just when the door was about to be opened, I would wake up. And those were reoccurring, almost nightly for years and years. And just, I'm like, well, maybe I'm watching TV that's bringing, those up. Didn't really know what it was about until I was probably, I'd say mid to late 20s. I converted to Catholicism when I was 19. And then I had joined the Sisters of Mary, the Presentation, out in Valley City.
And you were in Illinois, right?
I was in Illinois. They had sisters in Illinois that I had gotten to know.
Okay.
And I had some really good friends that, were supportive of me, discerning my vocation and stuff. And one night I had this same nightmare while I was in formation. And the sisters tried to wake me up, and I ended up kicking one of them in the face.
Why?
She was like in her 80s.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I knew this was not normal. Something was going on. And so went and spoke to a counselor about it and stuff. Still wasn't sure what was happening. We thought maybe it was just because of formation and things. And then during this time, I didn't really have a relationship with my parents. My father had been out of my life since I was, 18 months old. I met him twice, and he had told my sister and I that he wanted nothing to do with us because we were girls, and he never wanted any daughters. And so later on, my sister had a relationship with him, but I never did. And my mom was in and out and stuff. Making poor choices, and I had to set some hard boundaries.
I do want to ask one question, and I know it might get answered, but let me step back because it's coming to me in my mind. When you went from being with just your mom into your grandparents' home, was that a good adjustment for you, or was it hard?
It was both.
Okay, because I was going to say
it was hard in the fact that my grandparents, the night we moved in with them, my youngest aunt was graduating from high school. So they were getting ready to be empty nesters. And here they're bringing in 3 young kids.
Wow.
So that, their thought process was hard. Also, the hard part was they actually had rules. We had chores. Your typical real family, we sat together every night as a family and had dinner. You didn't leave the table until you were done eating. I had my first vegetable when I was 10
wow.
because my grandmother made a well-balanced meal, and their rule was you had to try it at least once every time she made it. So it wasn't like I ate it once and then I didn't like it and I was done. And now I like vegetables, So that part was hard in transitioning. But yet it was also great because we had stability. We always knew what was expected of us. We always knew that our clothes were going to be clean. We always knew that if we were sick, they were going to take care of us and take us to the doctor. We always knew we were going to be fed. So
were you bonded to your mom, though, even though it was kind of erratic?
Well, in the sense that we wanted to protect her. We didn't tell our grandparents a lot of things that had been going on.
Yeah.
And so when I was a freshman in high school, my grandpa came down with an illness that he he had a hard time having 3 teenagers in the house coming and going with all their different activities.
Mm-hmm.
And so he purchased a home for my mom, paid all the bills, everything, bought our groceries every week and everything like that. But all my mom had to do was pay for her car and her and the telephone bill. He paid for everything else.
So he's like, so at that point, did you move out or
we did move out?
Okay,
but we were 5 miles away.
Okay.
So they could still kind of keep eyes on us and stuff, but yet he needed to have more peace and stability. Not that we were disruptive, but teenagers, and so when I was between my sophomore and junior year of high school, my mom had been gone for weeks at a time. And my brother and sister and I made a pact that we never told my grandparents.
So you're in this house that they're funding.
Yes.
And your mom is mostly gone.
Yes.
Oh my.
So I was like freshman, sophomore. My brother was a year behind me in school. My sister was 2 years behind me in school. And so my sister was in grade school, like 7th, 8th grade. And we're living virtually by ourselves,
right?
Taking care of ourselves, getting ourselves up for school, everything. Right. Not telling my grandparents because we wanted to protect our mom, but yet we also knew my grandparents would be really hurt and upset because it's their daughter.
That's a lot of pressure to put on 3 young people.
Yes.
Like you're having to carry the weight of the world and your lives and your futures and your past and every relationship.
Yep.
And so was there one of you who was kind of the leader or how did that work?
I kind of was because I'm, the oldest by a minute, but we all pretty much lived our separate lives. We all had our own friends and things like that. And we had some really amazing neighbors that kind of watched out for us. Our one neighbor, like if we needed our car fixed or whatever, he was a mechanic, so he fixed our car, and we would say, well, we'll pay you, but we ended up not paying him because we didn't have money.
Right.
We weren't yet. We were just getting a job,
Did the neighbors, did they have an inkling to? Okay.
They did. And so like I had another neighbor a block away that they took me under their wing. I would show up there at their house before school and she would do my hair for school or for a volleyball game. I would then leave school at lunch because we had open campus. I would go to their house and then at supper time I'd pop in, quote unquote, and ended up would stay for supper. Or she would make me, if I had an away volleyball game, she would make me a snack and say, oh, we have extras. Like they knew. And out her kitchen window, she could see our house. So she always knew when I was home, when we weren't. And I don't know this 100%, but I suspect that our neighbors kind of like let my grandparents know what was going on.
Okay. And didn't call social services or anything like that?
No,
interesting.
No.
Okay.
It was a small town of like 600 people.
Okay.
So everybody looked out for each other.
Sure.
And so, but there was a night when my mom did come home that somehow all of my aunts and uncles and my grandma found out, and they all came and had an intervention with her. And I remember walking in on it, and they're like, you need to leave. And that intervention ended up being, you need to stay and take care of your kids, or you need to leave. And she walked out and never came back. And so I suspect that those neighbors had an agreement with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, which no one has ever said that. And that was, I was 16 at the time.
Yeah.
And that's how they knew she was home.
So this is a part of your story I had not heard before because there's so many different layers to it.
It would be a Hallmark story.
Yeah. Oh my. So, and I'm just thinking of your mom, like what it would take to abandon your children. Like it's got to be something so compelling that you could just walk away and just you just walk away.
Yeah.
And there's no one, there's not a dad, there's some grandparents down the road, but wow.
Yeah. So at that point then, my grandparents made, I believe, the ultimate sacrifice for the three of us. Because of my grandpa's medical condition, my grandma moved out and moved in with us.
Wow.
They stayed married, and they went out on dates Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and nobody could go with them.
But how old were they at this time?
Let's see. Right now, my grandma is about to be 87, so she was probably like mid 60s.
Okay.
Yeah. Mid to late 60s. So she moved in with us and took care of us until we graduated high school and we were on our own. I was actually the last to leave home because I loved being with her. Okay. And so then my grandpa sadly ended up dying unexpectedly in 2000 when he was 64 at that time. Okay. So they were probably early 60s, I guess now. And so I'm still very close with them. And my mom, she just went and lived her life, just did her own thing. Yeah.
That's just hard to imagine. So I know I brought you back.
Oh, that's okay.
And all of that stuff will tie into what. So you were at Maryvale, which is here in North Dakota, and having nightmares.
And stuff. Eventually, then I discerned that religious life was not my vocation, and I moved back to Illinois.
Okay.
I was teaching at the time, and in Southern Illinois. And I got to so bad that I refused to go outside at night. Let me step back 1 minute. So while I was still in formation, it did come to light that I had been sexually abused. I had started having these memories and stuff, and then I got some counseling or whatever. But when I told my grandmother, when I was home for Christmas one year, I told her, and her response was, I always thought something happened to you, but I never knew for sure. And that was painful to hear on two levels. One level that if you think somebody's being abused and sexually or physically or what, you got to do something. You got to say something. I would much rather be wrong and protect that child than let it continue. But then on the flip side, also realizing that in my grandma's day and age, they didn't talk about those things. You just buried it. Right. And so her comment to me was, I never knew for sure. You just need to forget and move on. That's what I tried to do. And I just kind of stuff it. And eventually it's going to come out.
And how old were you then?
I was in my mid-20s.
Okay.
I was still in religious life, discerning my vocation when this happened.
So what do you think it was that it finally came out? Do you think it was because you were in finally this safe community? Do you think it was your age and your brain was starting, or all of the above?
I think it was all of the above, but I think more so because I was in that safe community, and I was learning more about myself. I was learning more about my faith. I was learning more about God being the father of, and I'm being his daughter. And then just having more quiet time and more prayer time, and where things are starting to come up. Wow. That I had kept myself so busy throughout my life and just stuffed it down because I was in a protective mode. Right. I didn't want anyone to know what my life was really like.
That's so profound for everyone out there. Everyone can relate to this. And I would just challenge people to have to carve out space.
Yes.
But it's scary. It's
100%.
Scary. Yeah.
100%.
But you felt you were in a safe place by then. So
yeah,
it was possible.
The sisters were amazing. I still to this day can't say enough about how amazing they were in accepting me and loving me and guiding me and teaching me. Even though that was not my vocation, but I really believe that God put me there for a purpose.
Here, I'm going to put you right over here in this little community in North Dakota in the hills.
Yep.
And with these people that, aren't in the world really.
100%.
And just let them love you.
100%.
And I will love you through that.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
God is so, but he's been generous. Like, I think back to the neighbors and just, this is a serious situation where you may not have survived out of that.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Mm-hmm. And, to this day, those neighbors are still some of my closest friends and family, if you will. Yeah. Chosen family outside of my biological family. Mm-hmm. In fact, we were just texting right before I came in and stuff. But, so then I'm back in Illinois and I'm teaching and these things are coming back up. And I'm sleeping with a butcher knife under my pillow. I'm sleeping with my shoes on. I'm double, triple, quadruple checking the locks on my doors. I'm not going out at night.
You're also alone. And
I'm alone. Yeah. I don't have a spouse. I don't have children of my own. I'm in a community where I had just moved back. I don't have a lot of friends because that's 2.5 hours away from my family.
Yeah, you're not back in your little hometown where everyone's watching out for each other.
No, yeah,
you're exposed. You're not safe anymore.
Exactly. And so one day I drove to a friend's house, which was 2.5 hours away, and they were like parents to me. They kind of adopted me through a program called Teens Encounter Christ, or TEC. And I was sitting at their counter. And Rick went to he walked in and came to give me a hug, and I just freaked out. And he knew he's a medical doctor. Mm-hmm. He went around the country giving talks on abuse and things. And he was like, "How long have they been coming?" And because they knew my story. Yeah. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like pretending like nothing's wrong, And he's like, "How long have the nightmares been? Like, how long are you doing all these things, And I lost it. And his wife walked out of the bathroom like, "What did you do to her?" Wow. Because she and I were just talking before she used the restroom. And so I broke down and he was like, "Okay, you're moving here. We are getting you help." And he just went into parent mode. Really, is what he did. And he had worked or served on the board for the Center for Prevention of Abuse in Peoria, Illinois. And he's like, "You're going here for counseling and you're doing this." And I'm like, "No, I'm not," he's like, "Yes, you are." And so I went, and the one counselor I met with, we totally did not click. I walked out of there. I'm like, "I am never ever doing this again." And he's like, "Yes, you are. And I know the perfect person." And he arranged it for this therapist, Miriam, to meet with me. And the only time she had open was 5:30 in the morning.
Oh my heavens. I'm not a morning person.
I'm not either. And so but I trusted Rick and Cheryl enough, and I loved them enough to be like, "Okay, you have my best interest at heart. I will do this one time for you." Well, 10 years later, she and I were still meeting every week at 5:30 in the morning.
So another takeaway, if you are feeling like you need therapy and the first one doesn't work,
keep trying.
Yeah. And that can be with a doctor or anything. 100%. Like, people are human, right?
Yes.
And so we have to be our own advocates.
Yes.
And it's nice if God sends another advocate. I want to pause really quick right here to talk about something. You and I went to a retreat earlier this year.
Oh, yes.
Through the John Paul Healing Center that was at our parish. And one of the things that I got out of that I keep coming back to is that Jesus, God, is coming to rescue you.
Yes.
He's on a rescue mission. And I see that thread in your life. And it's just amazing. Like, it really is. And I'm sure it continues on. So anyway, just that idea, because I don't know that we always think of it that way. And to me, it's such a stark example of, no, he is actively wanting to free us. We do have a part to play in that, because he won't, he's a gentleman. I always say he's a gentleman and won't
But
force
he's always pursuing us, pursuing us. And I always think about the prodigal son parable and how, like, the father runs out to the son, you know, if we, like you said, play a part and we come halfway, he's going to come 75% or 90% of the way.
I just heard a talk this weekend at a church in Minnesota, and he talked about the prodigal son and how he's always scanning the horizon. He's always looking, scanning the horizon. And then there's the son, and then he runs with open arms, right? There's so much there. So anyway, back to your story. So you're 10 years with Mary Ann?
10 years with Mary Ann. Then she retires. But when she retired, we had to have a 2-year no contact professional separation. And literally the day after those 2 years, she called me. I was one of 2 clients that she gave her personal information to when she retired, because she wanted to stay in touch. And we did. I always knew that, like, if something was going on in my life, I could call her. And unfortunately, she just died unexpectedly last May. And so the greatest gift she gave me were tools to use for coping, for dealing, for processing, because healing from any trauma, whether it's a car accident, whether it's sexual abuse or anything, does not happen overnight. And it's not linear. It's like one of the analogies I use, it's like an onion, where you have to peel one layer and you can deal with that, and you can go on maybe 6 months, a year, 5 years, and then something will trigger you and you'll have to do another layer.
And this is why it's so tragic, because children, first of all, are vulnerable. They're depending on adults. That was lacking to some degree in your life. We are wholly dependent, and we are being formed in our childhood. That's why it's so complicated. That's why it took so long. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about whatever you can share about the abuse? Like, how old were you? Because to get a sense of how long it took to uncover it.
So my earliest memory was when I was 3 years old. I was playing out in the on our swing set with my brother and sister. And young kids, they don't want to go to the bathroom when they're out playing and having fun. And I ended up wetting my pants. And at that time, my mom's boyfriend was babysitting us. And of course, this will be another thing that we'll talk about, but his name was also Rick. Okay. And so I went in to go to the bathroom, and that was the first time that the abuse started, where he was helping me change my clothes and then started the whole touching and everything. And then that continued on for several years. And then the next time I was 6 years old, and he actually raped me. And I was sleeping in bed, and my mom was passed out, 6 years old. And again, like, I'm very confused. I'm a young kid. I'm kindergarten, first grade. No one's ever talked about this. We're just learning about bus drills and, stranger danger and all those things. I didn't know what this meant. And he was a father figure to me, and I just thought this was normal. It wasn't until I was in my teens that I started seeing other familial relationships, my friends with their dads, my grandpa, how that's not normal. And then my mom and him broke up. And then when I was in high school, they got back together. And when I would see him not very often because we didn't see my mom very often, he would call me honey and sweetie and, cutie pie and all these. And I just remember getting the heebie-jeebies and the icks. And, and I shared this with my neighbor, and not sharing the abuse because I wasn't fully aware of that yet. But I shared with her the uncomfortableness, and she's like, you've got to tell him to stop. If that makes you uncomfortable, you've got to put a stop to that. And so I tried, and my mom's like, oh, he just really loves you guys, and blah, blah, what's going on, making excuses.
Was it denial? Did she?
100% denial.
Okay.
100%.
Did she know, maybe, or?
I think she did, but I think, the drugs and the alcohol, were
more important than letting that.
Yeah. And they killed brain cells. Let's just be honest. It changed her whole personality, and it changed her whole way of parenting. And I honestly believe, let me say right now, I have 100% forgiven my mother. I've 100% forgiven Rick, but that took 20 plus years. But I honestly believe my mother, as well as she had a great mother, did not know how to be a parent because of the drugs and alcohol. And I honestly believe that that warped her sense of being and her choices.
She didn't love herself.
Exactly.
So you can't love others if you don't love yourself. We can't give what we don't have. And so rejecting her own self and her own identity then just transferred onto you all.
And I'll never forget my one aunt who I'm the closest with, whose name is also Miriam. It was just all these names are so familiar or the same.
Come back,
Yeah. But I remember her saying to my mother once, I'm really sorry you don't love being a mother like I do. And that touched me, because she's only 10 years older than me. So we're more like sisters.
Right.
But that's exactly what it was. My mom did not know how to love herself in order to love her children.
Right.
And knowing what I know about myself and how long it took me to love myself, I can have some empathy on that and some compassion on that. It doesn't take away what happened, but what happened to me also does not define me. And it took me a long time to come to that understanding and embrace that as well.
I want to pause again to go over some statistics that you gave me that I think are really important to mention. The situation with the boyfriend, very typical, right?
Yes, 100%. So 1 in 4 girls will be sexually assaulted before they're 18. 1 in 6 boys will be assaulted by the time they're 18. And within those, 90% of them know who their perpetrator is. That is horrifying to me.
Well, if you think about it, it's all about relationship in terms of our health and our, and so then the negative would also that relationship is what allows that.
And perpetrators groom their victims. They groom the families, my mom's boyfriend probably saw that she was a single mom.
Yeah.
And, she had her own demons, if you will, with drugs and alcohol. So he was going to be her savior and he was going to help the kids. So he was grooming that.
Right. And she was in that same fog, probably.
Yes. Yes.
I just have to step into, my life didn't go to that depth, but I had experienced some inappropriate touching at a birthday party one time with older brother that we were playing hide and seek or whatever and chased me around and there was something. And then with another friend when I stayed overnight, and her older brother also would, had an inappropriate touch, on the playground. And when you said the ickies, I lied to her and told her that I couldn't stay over at her house anymore because he had kind of touched me one morning and I So anyway, I haven't experienced the depth, but enough to know like how that took over my life. And I was scared to tell anyone. I was first or second grade when that happened. And it's just amazing what children will hide because you don't understand. I don't know what this is, but I know something's not right and I have to run from it.
Well, and not only that, the perpetrators often will threaten you. And so in my case, even though I didn't understand what was happening, I understand a threat. And I understand being scared by a threat. And Rick threatened to kill my family if I said anything. And said, no one's going to believe you. He showed me his gun.
I have another question then. And I don't know if you want to answer this, but were you the only one that was abused? Or
as far as I know.
That's got to be...
My brother and sister have never said anything. But oftentimes, the perpetrator has more than one victim.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if he's still alive or not. The statute of limitations had run up before I was able to come forward. So, he got away with it. Which was a whole nother thing that I had to deal with.
Right.
And
the ultimate justice will happen, but maybe not in this life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are some other statistics that we need to know about as we're talking about this?
As a thriver, I like to say, because I am thriving in my life right now. And I was a teacher for 15 years. I could pinpoint some child who maybe it wasn't sexual abuse, maybe it was physical or emotional abuse. But if you have a child maybe your child, or if you have a student or whatever, that all of a sudden starts acting up for no apparent reason, that is a red flag. And or if you have a young child who's been completely potty trained and has never had an accident, and then all of a sudden starts wetting the bed, or all of a sudden starts having these unexplainable night terrors or nightmares when they're, usually like toddlers will have night terrors, but if they're, older and they're having these night terrors, there's something more there that needs some looking at, whether it's counseling, whether it's going to a medical doctor, whatever. Those are some huge red flags. And unfortunately, as a teacher, I had a student who was being abused. And we had a presentation on Aaron's Law that, he just kind of went off. But he ended up disclosing to me. And so this, of course, was right before COVID and everything. So we were able to get him the help he needed.
What is Aaron's Law?
So, Aaron's Law is a law by Aaron Miriam from Illinois who was abused by a neighbor and then also by her cousin. And finally told her... and she is setting out to pass this law that teaches children safe touch, safe secrets, unsafe secrets. It's not sex prevention or sex education, but it is, in the schools we teach DARE, we teach tornado drills, we teach even like intruder drills now, but we don't teach children to speak up when they're being hurt. And so it's all age appropriate. It's free curriculum that she has developed on her website, aaronslaw.org, that people can download. Thankfully, North Dakota passed this law. I believe it was in 2017 or 2016. 2017. Yep. Minnesota passed it in 2018. And now her goal is to get it passed in all 50 states and then internationally. And so right now she's working very hard in Wisconsin. They've killed it for 10 years. New York killed it for many years. And then literally the first day that it was taught in the schools in New York, 8 boys came forward and said their principal was sexually assaulting them. By the time it went to trial, 21 boys, middle school boys, came forward. And now that principal will spend the rest of his life in jail.
So Aaron's Law is a curriculum that is mandated to be taught in the states in which it
in
is.
The public schools, K through 12.
Okay.
But a lot of districts kind of skirt around that because there's no funding for it. And that was why a lot of legislators would not pass it. Well, she's made it so that there doesn't need to be funding. All they have to do is go to her website and download it. It's free. It takes 1 hour to
kind of be trained or whatever?
Well, to teach it to the children.
Okay.
And all it is teaching them, like, if you are being touched where your bathing suit covers by someone that is not supposed to be touching you, gives them the information to how to speak up. Gives them that courage and that bravery that they're going to be believed.
I'm thinking of my own situation. It was honestly a touch on the forehead, like a sensual touch. So that I would say now. I didn't know at the time. So I wasn't in my bathing suit. I was on the playground. Like, but if I had known, that was around the age.
That icky feeling, that uncomfortable feeling. That is also a way, because we all have that within ourselves. We all know what feels inappropriate or uncomfortable. But if we're not giving the tools to speak up, like, I believe if I had Aaron's Law when I was in kindergarten, first, second, third grade, my life would look vastly different. Now, I'm not saying I have a terrible life, but there's been a lot of hardships. And maybe I would have had hardships prior, but it would have been different. I would have had more tools to understand and process sooner. I was just talking to a friend not too long ago about how, yes, I'm an adult, but it was probably in my 30s that I was making decisions like I was 12, 13, 16, because I didn't get to live those years and those formative years and learn those at that time.
Right. You were surviving.
I was surviving. And so I was kind of reverting back in some ways.
Got to catch up to that phase over there.
Exactly. Exactly.
Here's the other thing, too, as far as the importance of things like Aaron's Law. I know from your life, and we haven't even, there's still more to say. It just, again, we talk about the layers and just how deep it goes with a child that's being formed. If that could be prevented, because the implications of what this does to a human being with a soul and with a unique purpose and a dignity, sex is such a life-giving, beautiful, creative force. But when it's tainted like it has been, where children who are not, like they're not supposed to be in that place at all. Like, it's so devastating. It does seem like we need to do more, because that's only going to triple and quadruple like the issues that we're dealing with.
It's generational.
Right, exactly.
And so, like, I have worked so hard in my own life to break that generational dysfunction. Now, there's still some of that when I go home and visit and whatever, but it doesn't affect me as much as it once did.
Right.
But if you're not constantly looking at the patterns and trying to break those and be better, it will continue cycling.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think, if you're a teen mom, your child is most likely going to be a teen parent, And so it's the same way, if you are abused, you're most likely going to be abused. Now, I will say that my brother and sister both are phenomenal parents. They have broken that cycle of abuse for their kids. I don't have children. And, that's something that I remember completely at the age of 5. And I don't know if this is because of the abuse or if this is because this was God's will for me, but saying, I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids. And, that's something at different times of my life that I've struggled, like, okay, is it really because of the abuse? Is it really because this is God's will for me? Like, and then just having to work through that. But I'm very happy being single because I feel like I can do more for like supporting Aaron's Law and supporting people and doing things within my faith and in the church better as a single person than I can as a married or a parent.
Sure. Well, there's so much more, and I want to make sure we get it all in. So we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with Kimberly Souba and her incredible story, which is going to bring a lot of hope, I think, once we get into it.
Yes, definitely.
Local news affects your life. It gives you the confidence and clarity to make better decisions every day. You can support that with a digital subscription. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to take advantage of our introductory offer, just $6 for 6 months.
We're back with more Matters of Soul Importance in Kimberly Souba. This has been an invigorating conversation. It's hard. It's a hard conversation to realize the effects of sexual child abuse or any kind of abuse, really. So if you are in a situation like that, what would you say to someone who might be listening and suspects something? You've already kind of given some advice about that, but where do people begin if this is like some lights are coming on here?
If you are, I would say, if suspecting a child that's in your life, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a parent, whether you're an aunt or a godparent or whatever, if you suspect a child is being abused in any way, shape, or form, I would highly encourage you first to ask that child like questions, not to probe them and say, has somebody touched you inappropriately? Or I would say stuff like, is there anything that makes you uncomfortable? Is there, and if it's a small child, obviously they don't have the words to share that with them, but you can watch them and how they play. Like give them some dolls to play with and see how they interact with that. If it's an older child, the very first thing, if they disclose that they're being hurt, abused anyway, your first thing to say is, I believe you. Because that opens up a door that tells that child, okay, you are a safe person to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
There is, like in my situation, when my grandma said, I always believed something happened, but I never knew for sure. That to me shut me right down.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't say that maliciously. She didn't know what to say. And being an older person, they didn't talk about those things.
Yeah.
But the first thing you say is, I believe you and I'm going to help you. And if it's like as a teacher, you have to report it as a mandated reporter. But you have to be honest with that person and say, I'm going to help you, but I need other people to help us help you.
Mm-hmm.
And then ask their permission. And you have to tell them, I'm a mandated reporter. Whatever you tell me, I have to share. And you don't want to betray them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be honest with them. So that's what I would say. If you are a person who has been abused or, whatever, I personally want to say I'm sorry because you should never have gone through that. If no one has ever apologized to you, like, please hear me say, I'm sorry that happened to you. And then find a good therapist. It may take a while that you are comfortable with. Maybe go to your pastor or your priest and ask for help in finding somebody. Miriam, who I went to for 10 years, the first 6 months I would sit in her office. I never said a word. I was testing her now that I know this, but she was completely compassionate. It was in her face and in her eyes. She never pushed me to open up until I was ready. Once I did start talking, she learned how far she could push me without pushing me too far. That's the kind of therapist you need.
Like Good Will Hunting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I would say, when I moved here to Fargo, I was struggling because I didn't really know a lot of people and stuff. I went to Father Luke at St. Anne and Joachim, and he suggested who to go talk to. Then I was very blessed to have Monsignor Dennis Sconsing take me on as spiritual director again. I really believe spiritual direction and therapy go hand in hand. You need both sides of that. Mm-hmm. You need the faith part and you need the psychological part. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think we have some really good therapists here in the Fargo area. I don't have them per se, but, if I needed that again, I know who I could reach out to.
So at some point along the way, you started writing.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that journey and a book that you've recently wrote that includes Aaron's Law in it.
Yes. So my journey of writing actually started during COVID. Well, no, my writing started when I was in high school. I kept journals all through high school and beyond. I would write. I had like 25, 30 books. And during COVID, I was just going to burn them. Because I knew that what was in them. I knew there were some dark things in there. I knew things. And my therapist, Miriam, at the time was like, no, I think you should read through them. You're in a much different place now. This will see how far you've grown. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. And she's like, no. She goes, just don't do it all in one setting. Because anybody who knows me knows I'm an all-in or I'm an all-out kind of person. And so I would take one journal and read through it at night. And as I was going through them, I found all these prayers and all these poems and stuff that I had forgotten that I'd written all these years. So I started tearing those out, and then I would burn the journal. And I'd have a glass of wine to help me through it. But as I ended up with over 150 poems and prayers. And talking with Miriam, I was like, I want to do something with these to give as a gift to my friends who have helped me through all this, through the family members that have helped me and stuff like that. And that's how, long story short, my first book came about, From Death to New Life, The Transformation of the Soul. It's a collection of all those prayers and poems and photographs and things. And I ended up self-publishing it. And then when I gave it to them as Christmas presents, everybody's like, you have got to sell this. If you can help one person through this, it will be worth it. And I debated on it and stuff, but helping people is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up getting it, into the Catholic bookstore in Peoria, Illinois, and started selling it. And then 100% of the proceeds went to the Center for Prevention of Abuse, where I was getting my therapy, because they didn't charge people. And this was my way of giving back for everything that I had. Mm-hmm. And so when one of my friends got this, her kids were in middle school at the time, in elementary school, and we wouldn't let them read it because there's some adult, mature content in it that they just were not ready to take on, or even know about me. Mm-hmm. And so that's how my first children's book, because they're like, you need to write a book for us. Okay. And so then I wrote A Caterpillar's Journey, and it's about a caterpillar who wants to become a butterfly, but doesn't have that self-confidence to be that butterfly that God created her to be, until she hears the Father's voice. And I wrote it in the way that, like, Max Lucado writes his books, where it's for kids, but yet adults can get a good message out of it as well. Sure. And so that came about. And then I was on my way home from a retreat. It was just a one-day retreat. And I had an hour and a half drive. And I had this thought, like, in this story that came to life. And that's where Flight of the Butterfly came. And it's kind of a sequel to A Caterpillar's Journey. So now it's the butterfly who doesn't believe she can fly and do what God wants her to do. And so that's how that one came about. And then I got busy. I was, being a youth minister and stuff, and things were coming up. So I was trying to push them back down and not process that. It took me a while. And then I had this thought. I was watching my goddaughter, who was 4 years old at the time, and her brother playing with their toy dinosaurs. And I'm telling you, my goddaughter Josie has brought me closer into Christ and Mother Mary than anything in my life has ever. She absolutely adores Mother Mary. And so I wrote a story called Mary, Dinosaurs, and the Wonders of God, a backyard adventure with Mama Mary. And it's about Josie and Dean playing with their dinosaurs and having a visit from Mother Mary, telling them how much God loves them and how much he loves creation and stuff like that. And then I came up with, just this past summer, Miriam's having a tea party, which is a coloring book that has a story that goes along with it and activity pages. So it's not your typical coloring book, but it's all about 8 different saints. And I thought, I know a little bit about a lot of saints, but why can't we help kids do that in a fun way? And then my newest one that's coming out in mid-April, that it's called Ellie Finds Her Brave Voice. And it's about a little girl who's been abused and is being taught Aaron's Law in her classroom, and then finds the courage and the bravery to speak up. And finally tells her teacher and the counselor and her mom, and just gets the help she wants. And in that book, while it's off of Aaron's Law, it's not explicitly like this is what happened to her. It's just she has that uncomfortable feeling when she's being taught this program. And then it also gives you talking points for parents and educators.
Okay.
As they're reading the story to the kids, that they can then talk about the safety of safe secrets and unsafe secrets, safe touch and unsafe touch. So it's also a teaching tool for parents and educators.
Mm-hmm. And that one's not quite out.
It'll be out in mid-April.
Okay.
I have a girl here in Fargo who's illustrating it right now.
Okay.
So, and then I'm working on my first novel, Light Still Stands, and that's about how it's about resilience and endurance, and how it's sometimes easier to leave than it is to stay in different situations.
Mm-hmm.
So
something popped out just while you were describing your beautiful books, which I just think are they're from your heart. It's not like you set out like I want to write books, but this kind of poured out of you. The first one was a thank you. Like a thank you note, right?
Yeah.
That just became something more. So it's really beautiful the way it developed. And I hope that we're going to include all the titles in the show notes so you can find those if you're interested. But you said something about the father's voice. I want to come back to that because I know a lot of people, a lot of abuse survivors have a hard time, especially 100%. If their abuser was a father. So how did you move through that? Because we do want to talk about God the Father, and he's loving and merciful, but not everyone is going to. So
I purposely wrote it so that it could be interpreted as God the Father or an earthly father. And it took, because I didn't have my father in my life, I was very fortunate to have uncles and my grandfather and my neighbors who showed me what a father's love is like. But it still was very difficult to accept that. And it, if I'm being real honest, like I still struggle with having the father's love. But in this last year, 18 months, I've been focusing on the word beloved. I'm God's beloved child. And the more that I work through my abuse, the more that I have that support from our amazing priests or my friends and their dads and stuff like that, the more that I am trying to like take that on for myself. And the more I spend in adoration and just sitting there, letting Christ in the Eucharist just stare at me. Sometimes I don't have to say a word. Sometimes I vomit of the mouth. But just embracing that has been very helpful for me. But I will say it has been and continues to be something that I have to work on. Because it doesn't come naturally since I didn't start my formative years with that knowledge or that feeling.
Right. I have a question because I know that sometimes as a Catholic, when we're putting things out there and we mention a priest, and right away the mud starts coming because there have been some priests that have not acted honorably in their position as Christ's, representative. How do you deal with that? Because
that was a hard one when that sexual abuse came out. I struggled so bad.
But you have had since then, and even before then, some very beautiful priests in your life. And I wish more people could know that. Like there's so many good priests, but of course the bad ones are the rotten apples, right?
Yes. So, and I knew some priests who were accused.
That would be hard.
That was very hard.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, first and foremost, that I had this internal struggle. Like, as a victim at the time, like, of course they're guilty. But then as a person who knew that priest, like, I couldn't imagine, and I had to come to the resolve that we are all human. I have sinned on things that people were like, I can't imagine she would have never done that, and I have to believe for myself at least, and everybody has to get to this point on their own, that our God the Father is a merciful and loving and forgiving Father. If he wasn't, there would be no hope, And so I have to look at those priests that have caused that kind of harm on another person with compassion. I don't have to agree with them. I don't have to support them. I don't even have to talk to them. But I have to give them compassion because that's what Christ does for me when I sin. And so and then having said that, I know a lot of people, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Right.
Having said that, I also have to think logically and be like, okay, if this priest is being accused of sexual abuse and doesn't deny it, doesn't fight it, there maybe is a little morsel of truth to that. I have a priest friend who has been fighting it for 10, 15 years. That takes a lot. So is he guilty or
is he fighting for his dignity? Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think people have to just look at it, whether you're Catholic or not. We all believe that, or are hopeful that Christ is loving, kind, merciful, compassionate. And if I want that from him or from another human being, I have to provide that. Again, I don't have to be friends with them. I don't have to talk to them. But my way of compassion is praying for them, not talking bad about them.
The church abuse scandal, it seems to me the evil one's perfect storm.
100%.
Because we need our priests, we need our pastors, we need the spiritual guidance. We need those, that brings us to Jesus.
Yep.
And that anyone would mar that for any soul. I mean, that will not be taken lightly in the end.
And it ultimately harms those priests who are living good, holy, true vocations to the priesthood.
Or people that want to do that and are scared, but thankfully, God can traverse that chasm there too, and we just have to trust in His providence.
Yes.
But are there any other things that we need to cover before we circle back to our question, which we can circle back to our question and still add things, but let's start with that. Kim, can sexual trauma be healed? We'll do that, and then we'll add more if needed to.
I think it can be healed. I think, though, it never goes away. It will always rear its ugly head in different ways, and sometimes in ways that you are not anticipating. But it doesn't define who you are as a human person. It doesn't define, it doesn't have to have a hold on for your whole life. I recently had a friend who had shared with me the image of a spiral staircase. It's always going to come back, but like a spiral staircase, you're always going up and you're looking down at it from a different perspective. And so, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would not have been able to sit here and talk about this with you as openly as I am.
Right.
But I have a different perspective now. And so I think it can be healed as much as the person is wanting and able to put in the work to do that. And it's not linear. It will take time. And I will be healing as long as I'm breathing. But I can have a different perspective of it now.
And just to add to that too, I think that's the case with everyone. Because I grew up in an alcoholic home, in an alcoholic environment, and there are things that I'm always going to be struggling with also. With the things that were missing from my own childhood. We all have brokenness.
Absolutely. Our world is broken.
Right.
And it started with Adam and Eve.
Exactly.
But I also want to say that there's so much hope in it. And people who are just starting their healing journey, and it is a journey, it's sometimes hard to see that hope. But if you have to put sticky notes all over your home or your apartment or whatever, which is what I've had to do many times, to remind yourself there's hope, there's light at the end of the tunnel, then they'll get there.
You mentioned the word beloved. I had never heard the song Belovedness until that conference that we went to. But years ago, when I was going through a really hard thing and needing a lot of healing through my own past, a friend of mine sent me a book. And it was a meditation, it had entries like a devotional, but every single one started, Dear Beloved. And that was when you said sticky note, I started putting that word and it healed me to read these little entries of God speaking to me that way.
Yeah.
It is very, very healing.
It is. And it's funny because I journal now every single day. And I have seen how my journaling has changed over the years from when I was a teenager. It was more like a diary, really. And now, I will journal, and then at the end of my journal entries, I will write a prayer. And it'll either be to Jesus or to Mary, or and then I sit and I listen and I wait. And I will then write what I hear being answered. And if I had my journal sitting here, you could visually see the different handwriting. The handwriting from me to Jesus is completely different, and the handwriting from Mother Mary is completely different from that. And it was a couple months ago, I was in spiritual direction with Monsignor Sconsing, and I read something to him, and his question to me was, what in that struck you? And I hadn't picked up on it before, but it was the word beloved. And then all of a sudden, like I'm hearing it in scripture, I'm hearing it in songs, I'm hearing, all this. Every time I journal, Christ is calling me his beloved. And so, I can completely, and I heard that same song at the retreat for the first time.
Really?
And I've done John Paul II Institute retreats before. I did the Healing the Whole Person several years ago. And so like,
I heard it and I'm like, I got to write it down. Like, and it took me a while to find it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, it's like a book and it's like all these things. And I'm just hearing it. It's just so beautiful. I'm going to play it at the end of this podcast because I think everyone needs to hear.
100%. Well, the funny part is I sent a text to my friend Elizabeth. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just heard this song. She's like, yeah, I sent you that song like 3 years ago.
Okay. Timing. That's so cool. I love that word. It's something to bring to adoration and really think about. One more thought that's kind of coming through my mind. What would you say to someone who has been maybe journeying with this for a while and sort of stuck? And I know sometimes we get stuck in having been victims of some kind. How do you push through and say, you know what, it's time to snap out of it?
Like, oh gosh, that is the $1 million question, really.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you can rush it. I had an amazing friend, Dan, who once said to me, "Aren't you just tired of being a victim?" And I was so mad at him. I'm like, I am not a victim. He's like, well, you're playing the victim card,
Yeah.
And when I sat with that, I was like, oh, yeah, it's never my fault. And nothing was ever my fault. I was always the victim when some things were my fault.
And as a child, you were powerless and you were a victim.
And I was always a people pleaser because I thought if I pleased people, nothing bad would happen. Well, I was losing myself in that.
It's impossible.
It is 100%. But back to your question about moving forward, I would just say that the person needs to be gentle with themselves, have compassion for themselves, but yet still have that determination to keep moving. Because if you move like 3 steps forward and something happens and you move 1 step back, you're still going forward.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so, like, if your end goal is to keep moving forward, and sometimes our journeys will take a side road, and that's okay. Like, I've had many teaching jobs and thought, oh, teaching was going to be my life. Well, now here I am as a communication specialist and loving it, and writing books and loving that. I'm never going to get rich off my books because I donate 100% of the proceeds to organizations that help children.
Plus, nobody does, even if you don't. You just don't. That's not the reason we write, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. But just have compassion for yourself. You will get there. It may take a while, and it will probably take a while. Some people, I've gone to conferences that Aaron has spoken at, where I've seen 80-year-olds going up to her crying because they have never shared with anybody that they were abused. It's never too late. And definitely I would say, check Aaron's Law out. She's got 3 amazing books that share her story, that, teachers told her she was never going to amount to anything. And here she is. She's got a master's degree in social work. She's got 4 beautiful children. She's going around the world, talking about this law to help other children. That's so, just have compassion and mercy.
I have one more question.
Yeah, for sure.
What about the person, because to bring it back to faith and matters of soul importance, who would say, well, God ignored that. God turned his back, so I can't go there. Because your story really does have a lot of faith in God and healing involved. Like, so if someone wants to try to go at it, but just nope to God, what would you say? And I know that's very individual too, so you can't, but what did you do?
God he was never always a part of my life. Even though my grandparents took us to church, Like, I did all the things that you were supposed to do, but he was never a personal part of my life because I had that same thought. Well, God doesn't love me. He doesn't care about me because he allowed this to happen. Mm-hmm. And through counseling, through spiritual direction, through, friends and family just loving me for where I was at, I came to the conclusion that, yes, God allowed it to happen because everybody has free will. But that doesn't mean he wasn't sitting right there with me crying and holding me during that and protecting me.
And coming in to rescue you on his white horse, right?
Yes.
He is on a rescue mission, and he has done that so much in your life, Kimberly.
Yes.
So,
I have to give a shout out to all. I even had a teacher I had in 6th grade, and then I had him all through high school, that I'm still very close with him and his family. I spend holidays with them. And he's been one of the biggest ones that has always been somebody I knew I could go to.
You're the epitome of the chosen family situation where you just have all these family members that are not related to you by blood at all.
People are always like, we don't know anybody who has more family members than you do, you know?
Yeah.
But it's because they have taken the mission of, and I think you had interviewed Dan last fall. Mm-hmm. They've taken that mission of reaching out and enveloping me and loving me where I was at.
Well, and they had the skills, like God put these certain people that he couldn't look away. He couldn't. That was his whole, that was his skill set. That was his learning. And here it was right in front of him.
Yeah. And now his daughter Janine and I are like sisters. I'm the godmother to her oldest child. Like, we're super close, and his wife will call me, periodically or text me. And I've been very blessed in that. I didn't always look at it as a blessing. But the more that I grow and the more that I mature, the more that I see that as the blessing that came out of my situation.
Yeah.
And if we have those eyes of, even if you're not a faith-filled person, but you have those eyes of looking at things like, okay, there's a reason why this is happening. I don't like it. It's wrong, but something better will come out of it. Maybe it's I can help somebody else.
Right.
Maybe it's I can then have compassion for somebody else's situation, whether it's an abuse situation, whether it's a cancer diagnosis,
anything. Absolutely.
It teaches you to have that compassion for other people.
Well, I just feel very honored, Kimberly. Now I've heard your story through a different means and now this, but this was just really beautiful. And I am so grateful.
Thank you.
That God has worked in your life and healed you to the degree that he has, and that you're now able to bring hope to others. So I hope anyone out there, that everyone has touched this in some way, will check out your books, and just thank you for sharing from your heart today.
Yeah, and they are at Hurley's here in town, as well as Holy Family, and on my website. And to any listener who is out there who is struggling and needs somebody to talk to, feel free to reach out to me. Whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, my website, whatever, I'm happy to help navigate some of those waters with people.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful offer, and have a beautiful day, Kimberly. Thank you again.
God bless.
You
Thank
too.
You.
Can sexual trauma be healed? Kimberly says yes, but it will take a while, and it could take a lot of assistance coming in to help God to do his work of healing, of rescuing. There's no doubt in my mind that God was working overtime to bring justice to Kimberly's situation and bring healing. Even when she resisted help, God persisted until finally love won her over. Sexual abuse is such a scourge in our world that rarely will we find someone who doesn't have a story, their own or one of a loved one. It's devastating that anyone could take the innocence of a child, or anyone really, and tarnish it in this way. Only the evil one could devise such egregiousness. and it has the capacity to destroy us. But today is Good Friday, a day we celebrate Jesus' death, which was also devastating, but it is still good because of what happens next. Jesus defies death and rises glorious so that we can know that there is hope. There is life after death. There is healing after trauma, and anyone affected by sexual abuse and trauma is worth their weight in gold to God. You are his beloved, and he's going to work just as hard as he has in Kimberly's life to rescue you, to redeem you, to bring renewal and wholeness, and make you new again. You are his beloved child. I've put a link to the song we mentioned, Belovedness by Sarah Kroger, which Kimberly and I discovered during the John Paul II Healing Center Women's Retreat we attended this past November. I hope you'll take a listen. Here's just a sneak peek by way of the first lyrics. You've owned your fear and all your self-loathing. You've owned the voices inside of your head. You've owned the shame and reproach of your failure. It's time to own your belovedness. You've owned your past and how it defined you. You've owned everything everybody else says. It's time to hear what your Father has spoken. It's time to own your belovedness. He says you're mine. I smiled when I made you. I find you beautiful in every way. My love for you is fierce and unending. I'll come to find you, whatever it takes. My beloved, it's time to own your belovedness. I'm so grateful to Kimberly for reminding me how much God loves and treasures us and will fight for us. At some point in our lives, we're all going to need rescuing, and our willing Savior is at the ready. Well, in a couple of weeks, we'll ask the tender question of an adoptive mother, where is God in the cross of infertility? If you or anyone you know and love has lived with this heartache, you'll definitely want to circle back for that insightful discussion. Until then, don't lose sight of the light.